Hi, welcome to SportX. It is just gone after 12, and I am Gerrit, and I presume we are live on LinkedIn, um, Facebook, YouTube, and I'm your host for SportX Forum. Today's edition, we focus on the events and sponsorship arena, and I'm the founder of TalkX TV, where we host the SportXForum. And as I've mentioned, today we're looking at the vibrant, ever evolving, and some may say ever disrupted ecosystem of sports events. We've got a great lineup coming your way. Some of our speakers have already entered the studio. And essentially, irrespective where you're watching us from, whether it's LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, you are free to comment directly on the platform you are watching from. And hopefully, we will put your comment on the screen. Also, we are running a short poll, which you can participate in and put your answers in the comment section uh, of the platform you are also watching. So, firstly, let's look at the topics that we're going to cover today. Essentially, some of you might have seen the blurb that we've posted, and I'm trying to load it. I suddenly just experiencing a technical problem here on a very, very sparse internet line. I might hasten to add. But Doug, without further ado, apologies everybody. This kind of stuff happens. It's Murphy's Law at its best in play. Everybody writes a playbook, but nobody reads Murphy's playbook. So Doug, welcome to SportX. Yeah, I'm not going to stress about what just happened there. You can hear me, Doug. Welcome.
Yes, I've got you. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, and the best thing about this platform, Doug, is whatever mishaps happen, we can edit it afterwards and just put up a nicer presentation, so and cut out the mishaps for that matter. So, Doug, seeing that we're running a few minutes late, firstly, tell us about yourself, your company, Wild Sports Agency, and what does it do in the ecosystem of sports events? Welcome.
Thanks, Gerrit. So Wild Air Sports and Wild Air Media House started when I moved on from Red Bull in 2016 with the clear objective of trying to enable what I would categorize as non-mainstream sports in South Africa with improving their visibility. And through improving visibility, improving things like ticket sales and entries, but also, and more importantly, growing their event brands. But off the back of that, delivering strong return on investment for the sponsors that are involved in their event or sponsors that they would seek to get into their event ecosystem. So the idea was really rooted in looking at creating a dedicated platform that would be able to enable those things to happen. I think important to clarify, though, my definition of what of your what should be a well-rounded approach to driving entries. I think it's an important layer, and of course it brings reach and scale where other marketing initiatives and activities might not, but it certainly isn't a silver bullet and it can't work in isolation. The way that I look at events in terms of the value proposition they offer, I kind of see it in 3 layers. So number 1 is the experience itself. So what is the product? Is it a strong enough product that people are willing to part with their money to come and participate and engage with you? And number 2 is, and this is more brand centric, is the people that are participating. So how relevant are those people in terms of that content isn't just a promotional tool, it's an engagement opportunity. It's got a job to do. And the mistake that I see a lot of events making is that they're producing content for the sake of producing content. They think that by having a couple of photographers there and some videographers there that they're ticking the box. But content can also be one of the most expensive aspects of an event production budget, especially if you're going live. And unless you are able to maximize the viewership and the outcomes that your content delivers, then invariably it can become a sunk cost. So I think events need to be very mindful of the types of content they're producing, the reasons why they're producing it, and being very clear on the job that they need it to do. And as soon as they can answer those questions and are producing off that base, then you start to see momentum building over time where you're reaching enough people, you're speaking in a way that gets them excited. Essentially, someone needs to be able to watch the content that an event produces in the sportive space in which I play, in the participation space, and say, geez, I can see myself in that situation and I'd really like to be there, and I'm gonna enter this thing. Alternatively, if they're not keen to participate, that it's an engaging enough story, engaging enough positioning that someone is going to say, you know what, I'm going to give up an hour on my Saturday. I'm going to watch this. This is really a watchable product. So content is important, but the systems, the strategy, and the positioning behind it is actually more important. And I see a lot of the time events just jumping to production and producing for the sake of it, with those other 3 pillars not being in place, and yeah, it doesn't do the job. So you really need to put a lot of thought into why you're doing what you're doing when you're spending that money.
Yeah, I like the framework around the 2 layers that you unpacked for us over there. So many events battle to grow their digital audiences or platforms. What strategies should organizers, rights holders be using to increase event entries, number 1, because that's a primary objective, grow their follower base, and boost engagement across digital platforms? The one thing, the holy grail that they must do to enhance that proposition, Doug?
So there's 2 parts, and I'm going to take them one part at a time. The first part in entries specifically is there is no amount of social media or good content that's going to make up for a product that doesn't capture people's imagination. If you the product that you are offering, and I view events as products, I view them as brands, I view them as businesses. Just because someone isn't walking away with a tangible product per se, they are walking away with an experience, a memory, a medal, a t-shirt. It's something that they've spent money on, so there's a commercial exchange in it. If someone isn't willing to spend their money because the product is weak, no amount of digital and social is going to help you. So it starts with that. Being mindful, if you're launching an event, is what product are you taking to market? Who are your competitors? How are you going to differentiate yourself? The same way that you would launch a new chocolate bar, the same way you need to approach launching an event, right? But once that's done and you've got a basic product market fit, you've got an entry base to work from, the job is to take that base and layer up from there. Now, one thing that's really quite exciting at the moment, Gerrit, is the fact that up until about 2 years ago, even a year ago, audience was king. If you didn't have a big following, then you were really going to struggle to reach people at scale. But the exciting thing that has changed around Instagram and TikTok specifically is that the algorithm now is really, if you are producing content that is relevant, that's on trend, that is positioned around people's general interests, doesn't matter whether you've got 500 followers or whether you've got 10,000 followers. If your content is relevant, it's in a space that people are talking about, the algorithm does the work for you and will go and find you the viewership. I'm going to give you an example there, and I'm going to hopefully I was going to see if I could switch my screen, but I'm a bit nervous to lose everyone on the call. I'll give you some context. And this was, let me just take the chance here. Okay, so this is a Nielsen SA sports report. It was on the Soweto Derby, Kaizer Chiefs and Orlando Pirates. Okay, on their weekend of the game. This excludes DStv Stream and Showmax on the Premier League. But on SuperSport, they got 3.2 million unique views. Their overall viewing audience over the weekend grew by 85%, and they had a 25% increase in live SuperSport viewership. Now, that's published data. Anyone can access that. Now, I would argue that the Soweto Derby is probably one of the biggest football matches of the year. It's just an icon, right? And everyone watches that. But I'm gonna draw your attention to a small event, non-mainstream, called the Mid-Mile Mile. Okay. Now, the Mid-Mile Mile, it is the world's biggest open water swim, so of course there's a lot of global interest in it, but it's nowhere near the same scale as a Soweto Derby. It's Soweto Derby. We've got 90,000 people in the stadium. We've got live streaming broadcasts. We've got excellent digital media execution. But because of the change in algorithm and smart positioning of content, the Mid-Mile Mile, now, this is off a following of around 25,000 people, managed to generate 2.5 million unique views, increased the reach by 667%, increased the engagement over event weekend by 1,026%, and increased the video views on their channels by 1,120%. Now, this gives you an idea of how powerful content becomes when it's positioned strategically, produced in the right way, and then delivered to people in a fashion they want to receive it in. It shows you the power of it. So you don't need to have these enormous channels. You just need to get your content mix right, your strategy right, your positioning right, and the algorithms do the rest. So it's an exciting time in digital. You don't need that massive audience anymore.
Yeah, no, leading on from that once again, so having given that framework, that piece of advice that you've given us at the beginning of your response over there, how can event organizers turn social media engagement, a different conversation, but linked to digital and enhancement? How can that be turned into a measurable conversation that would interest the sponsor and other stakeholders? Doug?
Well, once again, it is part of the mix. It's part of the value proposition. So when I look to engage with brands and around sponsorship and reporting in particular, I go back to those 3 layers of value and I assess what the experiential opportunity was for those brands on the ground. So in other words, what was the level of execution that they were able to execute that engaged with the participation base or the spectators of the experience? There is a huge amount of value in that. And Gerrit, to be honest, I think that aspect of sponsorship now is going to become infinitely more valuable as we continue to move into the digital and AI world. Human connection is becoming more and more scarce, and brands that can get in front of their consumers, not in the sense of being on screens, are really those that are going to form longer lifetime value types of commercial relationships with their target markets. But we take that into account. Then, of course, the second layer is the participation base. So I've mentioned this already, but what is the value of that individual that's participating or spectating in terms of the customer value to the brand that's there? So if an automotive brand is sponsoring a trail running event, what would the value of that person be? And then the third layer of value we include is digital, but we root it in experience, people, then digital. The important thing is that collectively, you want to be able to offer those 3 things to a sponsor.
Yeah.
Digital is what I call the multiplier of those value propositions of the experience itself and the target market that's attending, and how you leverage up into digital to reach more people that are like-minded, that enjoy the sports and so on. When it comes to measurement, that really depends, and I don't say that lightly. It depends on what the brand needs as an outcome. You've got some brands out there that are established that don't have a brand problem, that don't have an awareness problem. Digitals are nice to have, but they're more interested in leads, right? So you need to focus your reporting on that. But if it's a brand that's starting up and they're in a growth phase and they do need awareness, then you need to be working against benchmarks of what successful or viral content looks like online. And this is one of the things that we've been very focused on in another business of mine called GoBadger, where we've actually built a sponsorship valuation tool where we take digital performance across social, across email, across web, across third party, where that type of third-party data is available, or those results have or the event brings in a media valuation company to do that from a traditional sense. And we attribute defendable RAND value numbers to what's achieved across reach, viewership, engagement, so that you actually get to a number, a real number, and it's a defendable number. So I'll give you another example where we've been working with an event at the moment that over the last 2 years has invested a bit more of their energy into building their digital media performance. The overall sponsorship value to brands now has grown by 45% as a result. So the overall sponsorship matrix value, what they can take to market, has increased significantly over their strategic investment into growing their digital performance. So I think content and media, and whether it's digital or traditional, it's there to do a job. It needs to deliver performance, and that's either going to come in the form of increased sponsorships, entries, or growing your brand.
Yeah, I know you're a big proponent of putting the product in the hand of the consumer in your other business, but now use that analogy when we come to events. Put it on top of the mind of the consumer, the potential entrant. For that matter,
it's very difficult to get people get experiences into people's hands unless they're physically there and participating in it. But if you take that same approach, that same methodology of trying to give people an idea of what the experience is going to be like, and you remove it from the digital landscape, I mean, that is a really obviously effective way of showing people what you're all about and what the experience is about, and you can showcase how others have enjoyed it. But I'll use an example, a big mountain biking event client of ours. We've been working with them for 18 years. And in the 4 months leading up to the event, we travel around South Africa and we execute a roadshow. And we invite riders that have participated in our event, that are on our database, to come and join us for a day at their local trail, where we'll host them. We'll have a talk by the person that builds all the trails and the owner of the event, and grab a coffee and a beer or whatever they like. It's a guided ride through different trails, and they really get to engage with the people that are behind the event. They get to experience a bit of the culture of the event. Events are very different. You've got some that are very corporate in their structure, others that are more relaxed, others that are community focused. And that is really a great way to connect with your audience directly, especially for those that haven't had the opportunity to experience the event yet. If they're in an environment where they've got 30 other people that are there at one of these events, and they're speaking to what their experience was, then invariably it converts to entries. So again, digital is one aspect, and it's an important aspect, but it won't work on its own. And that's why, I mean, Kheri, we just pulled the results of the work that we've done at the Cup Sani to See. And in the space of 15 days, we've generated 10.9 million views. We've had over 55,000 content shares. But that's all off the back of the work that we did leading up to the event, doing road shows, engaging with people on the ground, leveraging that into digital. So it's that whole ecosystem and that strategic framework around it that enables the conversion to happen. And that's I suppose, an example of how you would get the product into people's hands in the event sense.
So you were throwing the stats at us now about engagement, online engagement. So as audience consumption habits continue to change, ever evolving, which digital trends should event organizers be prioritizing to grow that viewership, enhance the audience engagement, and maximize commercial opportunities? Because at the end of the day, Coca-Cola in America moved their advertising account from A to B because B said, I'm going to deliver first-party data. Your take on that, Doug?
I mean, data is the play in the end, right? That's what everybody's after. I think that events in particular offer it's a really data-rich environment. I think that there are There's going to be a lot of advancement. There is going to be a lot of advancement in the next 2 to 3 years around how to extract that data and to convert it into really meaningful commercial use cases. But if you're looking to produce content that is going to be effective and it is going to generate the viewership, which ultimately underpins a lot of the return on investment you can offer to brands and drive your entries and so on, you have to play the algorithm game. You have to understand what these digital ecosystems are preferring, and you have to have a well-rounded execution. If you're going to be working on Instagram, which is a platform we spend, I would say, 90% of our time on, for us, it's a very exciting platform, and there are many layers that you can execute within it. So Instagram stories is like mini live streaming, to be honest. You can be in the moment, it's raw. There's not much of an expectation of it being very polished. You've got reels, you've got carousels, you've got single posts, you've got live options there as well. But what's important, particularly on the performance side of things, is how you show up. If I look back at what we were doing at the Aquila Midmar Mile or the Sani to C 5 years ago versus what we're doing now, it's completely different. And that's not because we've wanted to make the change for the sake of making the change. It's been because we're playing to what the algorithm is going to help us get to more people. So it's about being very aware of what those algorithms are doing and making sure your content is in line with that. That's important.
Great. So somebody, an industry expert last year, commented It gives me the opportunity and the privilege to call on Joe Hammond. There we go, Joe. If you can unmute yourself. So Joe is the founder and CEO of Novus Group, and he will share with us the details of a report his company recently compiled on the media value sponsors gained from associating themselves with the Live Golf tournament that was held in South Africa pre and during and post the actual event. But firstly, Joe, tell us more about what is it that Novus Group does, and then go right ahead with unpacking the report to our audience. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Gerrit. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the invite. I'm going to try and share my screen, Gerrit. So just tell me if it works.
Good. Not as yet. There we go. So yeah. So just say that the document, and then I'll add it to the stage.
It's media and sponsorship monitoring in South Africa.
There we go. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, yes. So again, thank you for the opportunity. I'm not going to take up too much time, but just to basically tell you a little bit about our company and then what we do and how we fit into sport. And also then just to run through that Live Golf report that you mentioned. So in a nutshell, the company is called Novus Group. All the software that we developed, we own, which is quite unique to providers because it allows us the ability to customize. We provide both local and international services. We have more than 750 clients that currently use our service. We founded the company in 2014, so we're 12 years old. It's a South African company, and we have a level 2 BEE. Then just for some credibility, just some of the clients that use our services. So as I always say, there's no client too big or too small. So we really do work from the biggest corporates in the country to really the smallest PR agencies. Then to just shoot into what it is that we actually do. So for starters, we monitor, scan, and capture about 500,000 items every single day. The items we monitor, scan, and capture are basically brands that are being mentioned, companies that are being mentioned, their competitors. Then we process all of that data, we analyze the data, and then we give it back to the clients in the form of an analysis report, which is exactly what we did with Live Golf. So in terms of monitor, scan, and capture, what we do is we start with traditional media. So we look at about 5,000 print publications. So that would be things like newspapers, magazines, digital magazines, etc. We also cover about 200 TV channels across South Africa, about 150 radio stations across South Africa. We cover more than 1 million websites across the world, which includes blogs and forums. That's on the traditional media side. Then on top of that, we layer social media, which is everything from Facebook to Twitter to Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn. And then the third layer is the actual sports events. So we look at live TV games. We also look at things like repeats, highlights. We also look at the sport chat shows. And then there's usually a pre-game and a post-game discussion. So then what we do is we take those three elements, being traditional media, social media, and sports events, we add them together into what we call a unified media database. So it basically, just to give you a few examples, so this is a screen grab of like online media, this is a TV clip, this is a radio clip, and social media. Then what we do is we take all of this data. So we take the print, the online, the TV, the radio, the social, and the sport, and we then capture all of this data. Like I said, we categorize it, we tag it, and then we store it in this database. And then from there, we can provide clients with analysis. When we look at live TV games, we actually look at 34 different elements to identify and find sponsor mentions or logos. So it's everything from on-screen banners to match clocks to corner logos, and then all the different clothing elements. right down to, I mean, if it's a golf game, we even look at the tee box signage, the fairway signage. So there's quite a lot we look for during live events. Just to give you an example, these are the banners that we look for during a sport event. These are the in-studio brandings, the match clocks, the corner logos. This is the different clothing elements. So you can see on-shirt logos. We even look at the medics. We look at the caddy clothing. Then there's a few examples of interview boards that we look at. We even look at product placements after the game with the interviews. So then if you think about it, what we then have is we have all of this data, and then that allows us to compile an analysis for our clients. Now, the analysis is customizable, meaning that we can customize it to your look and feel. And then the analysis can be delivered as a daily report, a weekly report, a monthly report, quarterly report, 6 monthly reports, annual reports. It really depends on what the client is looking for. And then typically, just to give you an idea of what a client would receive is they would get something like this, where we do a combined AVE value for the entire event. AVE, of course, meaning the advertising would have been worth if it was paid for advertising. We look at the total number of items we picked up. We then break it down into those 3 elements. So we look at sponsorship, then we'll tell you how many references we found, what was the audience for that pillar, and then what was the AVE value. We then look at the traditional media, so how many items we found across online, print, and broadcast media. What was the reach? What was the AVE value thereof? We also look at social media, which is Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all of those elements I mentioned. We give you the volume, the reach, the AVE. And then from here, we then give you a combined view across all 3 of these pillars. Then we also go into more detail. We can become very granular, so we can give you a breakdown for each sponsor, but this is just an example. So on this event, for example, you can see that Standard Bank got the majority of the coverage, followed by the Ladies Tour, Durban Bull Golf Club, etc. So that's just an overview briefly of what it is we do. And then to go into that Live Golf report. So like you mentioned, we tracked the Live Golf event for a period of 1 month. So it was from the 24th of February until the 25th of March. Over that 1 month period, what we found is that across the different media elements, we picked up a total of 1,000 items. The reach of those items combined was 128 million, and the AVE, or the advertising value of the event, was 45 million. Like I mentioned, we break it down per element and then give you a combined view. We also give you an executive summary that just explains what happened during the event, and we highlight if there were any items that stood out. And then we also give you a breakdown of the sponsors. So here you can see we sort of listed the top 20 sponsors on the event. So Live Golf, obviously being the title sponsor, was the main sponsor with a value of 25 million, followed by the rest. And then we give you a little pie chart just to show you the spread between the different sponsors. Then we go down and we actually break it down per sponsor, where we can tell you where each sponsor got most of their coverage from. So you can see Aramco got most of their coverage came from broadcast, followed by signage. With Auto in General, it was a similar thing. It was broadcast and signage. I'm not going to go through the entire list, but you can see we give you a breakdown for every single sponsor and the elements that drove their sponsorship coverage. Then what we do is we zoom into each one of the major sponsors for the event, just to give you a breakdown. So for example, for Live Golf, we picked up 144 broadcast mentions. The reach was 18 million. The AVE was 3.8 million. We picked up 7 clothing elements, 554 mentions, 31 signage, and that gives us a total of 736 items with a total AVE of 25 million. Then we break it down for you visually into signage, broadcast, and mentions, and then also the different media platforms. You can see they got most of their coverage from online media, followed by TV, and then radio and print. And then we do the same for all the other sponsors. So I'm not going to go through each sponsor in detail, but you get the idea. And then we just look at the a breakdown of the audience ratings. So we get this data from, we use a system called Telmar, and they get the data from TAM. So it is publicly available information, but we just give you a breakdown of the audience figures per broadcast segment, and then a total for each, for the entire event. Then we also look at the audience in a bit more detail. So we can tell you what percentage were male versus female, what the different age groups were. So 15, 25, 35, or 50. We look at the living standard measures breakdown. So in which sort of category the audience fell. We also look at the demographic of the population. So how many white, colored, Indian, and black viewed the event. And then we give you a breakdown. So just again, a few screen grabs of typically what we would identify as sponsors during the events. So our team actually looks at the event in real time. They then tag the events, looking specifically for sponsor mentions. And then we obviously add all of that data together at the end to provide the analysis. So just a few examples of the print coverage we picked up. Some online coverage we picked up. And that's basically the report. I don't know if you have questions.
I'm next to you, Joe. You can hear me?
Yes.
The proverbial virtual question. Can you see my slide? Can you hear me? Joe, so if I'm a medium-sized marathon, for example, and I want to scale over the next 3 to 4 years, what is the one piece of advice as the rights holder that you would give me in terms of my inquiry to do a sponsorship analysis of our event that's coming up in, say, August?
Well, typically what I would suggest is maybe we compile a report for the client just to show them, maybe on a different marathon if they haven't sponsored a marathon before, just to give them an idea of the type of exposure they can expect. And then we can also advise on things like, where would they get the best value? So, for example, we find that with a lot of the sports, on-field logos tend to pick up a lot of value, and that's a relatively cheap way to advertise. Clothing is also a good way to get your name out there, but the only problem with clothing is because the players move around a lot, it's difficult to always identify the logos easily. But yeah, I would definitely suggest that we either provide them with a report on a similar event, or we look at an historic event and provide them a report, and then from there start the discussion on what we can change or what they should change.
Yeah, just one more question before I add Doug and Sika to the studio, maybe to engage with you on what you presented. My question is that if my event is not broadcasted, right, what would you suggest in terms of audio visual footage that the organizer or the rights holder should do?
Well, we're definitely seeing a pickup with social media. So if the event is not broadcast on a mainstream TV channel, so recently we looked at the Cape Town Marathon and we found that there were online streams for the event. So what we do is we try and pick up a stream like that. So an easy way to do that nowadays is through YouTube live streaming. So we pick up the event, we record it that way, and then we analyze it afterwards. Or we look at things like social media, like Instagram, and we try and pick up, coverage that way.
Okay, Doug and Sika, I'm sure you guys have been listening to Joe. Any questions that you would like to pop at him? Unmute. Doug?
No, no, no. I'll let Doug. I think Doug probably has some
No,
questions.
am I being thrown under the bus here? Joe, I don't envy your job. There are many moving parts and so many different mediums. I suppose what's always something that's been top of mind for me for a while, and I'm glad I'm able to ask the question, is the media ecosystem becoming more fragmented, bite size being the silver bullet of reaching millions of people. It's fascinating how one 15-second clip on TikTok can be viewed by 30 million people. How do you guys adapt to that type of fragmentation? Because it's happening at scale and the rate of change is fast.
Yes, I mean, social media has definitely moved the game along quite a bit. So obviously with every platform we monitor, we have to get certain metrics loaded into the system. So for example, every Facebook page we monitor, we have to look at things like followers, likes, comments, posts, and then all of that metrics get captured literally with every event and every post. So it is possible for us to keep adding more metrics as we move along, but we've definitely found that in South Africa, for example, like Facebook is still pretty popular as well as Twitter. LinkedIn is less popular for retail brands, but it's very popular for corporate brands. So it sort of depends on who the customer is and who the target audience is. TikTok is definitely becoming more popular, but those are sort of the platforms that we look at. I mean, there aren't really more and more platforms coming along, so it's really just the same platforms, but we're getting more metrics.
Okay, great. Doug, you want to respond to that? And Sika, you're going to talk about community-based sports festivals. And whilst this is probably so far removed from the thinking or the list of priorities in Sika at this point in time, surely the reason why I asked Joe that question was, how can you guide that emerging event to also do this and perhaps scale the level of sponsorship in Sika?
Yeah, look, I think it becomes very interesting when you look at the community-based events or the smaller kind of sporting events. You think of, I look at an event like the Phillies games that happens over December. I mean, they've been very fortunate to get SuperSport as a partner over the past couple of years. But for events like that, selling or your return based on media isn't really going to be what sponsors are looking for, because chances are majority of those events don't get as much media. So you need to kind of look at it differently and position it differently, especially when it comes to looking for sponsorship. And for me, this is not just about, and this is not the thinking that should actually go with just the community-based events, but with sponsorship in general. Budgets are getting smaller. So when guys are getting sponsorship proposal, they are looking for certain things is, how do I get bang for my buck? And that's the most important part, right? It's not about impressions, but it's about impact and outcome. And that's how you look at it. So when guys are now building these sponsorship events and these decks or trying to get sponsors on board, is you can no longer just go and sell me impressions and can sell me a logo or sell me a billboard or a board on the side of the field, but rather for me as a brand is I'm looking for outcome. I'm looking for engagement, how many people get to interact with my brand at the event. And those are the kind of things that, people looking for sponsors should actually be looking at now. How do I look at outcome as opposed to impressions? So, and it's a mindset thing. It's a shift in mindset, and a lot of us have been looking at it of selling impressions and selling logos and selling visibility. But at the end of the day, that visibility means nothing when your budgets are tight and there's no outcome, and you spent, let's say, 9 million rand to sponsor. So they've seen my brand, but what is the outcome of it? And that's what we've got to get to.
Okay, great. Joe,
Maybe just to add to that, so we had a similar situation about a year ago where Boland Rugby has got they've got a very loyal support base, but the support base is very local. So the games don't always get broadcast on your mainstream channels. But what we found is they have a lot of Facebook groups between the different supporter groups. And by us tapping into that, we could actually provide the client with quite detailed metrics and value on things like engagement and reach and viewership, etc. So again, just to underline, the social media is really becoming like a more of a mainstream platform, especially for the smaller events, because the smaller events can't really, justify to be on the mainstream channels because the cost is just too high. So social media has given the smaller teams and smaller sports a real powerful voice.
Yeah, Joe, and just maybe to add on to it, and I'm kind of cutting into some of our conversation, Yachar, but that's the reality of it, right? Is that when guys approach sponsors, the majority of them have not segmented or have not built out their proposition well enough to understand that they can sell that social media as an asset to a brand. So everyone wants to sell you a front of shirt, or they want to sell you, a board on the side of the field. Actually, you have more people engaging with you. For a brand, it could be more valuable for you to sell that social media space because there's engagement there. They can see who's actually speaking. They can understand that demographic because you can see who they are. So a lot of the smaller tournaments or the smaller clubs, especially from the club perspective, because clubs are looking for sponsors, they don't understand that the community that they've built within their social media space is one that they could leverage to get a sponsor on board, to sponsor the social, to say, okay, I'm going to sponsor your live stream because I understand that you have 20 and this around like 20,000 people on your Facebook page. So I'll sponsor the live stream so people can watch on Facebook Live. That creates another revenue stream for you now where you can sell people. Actually, we have a community of 20,000 people that watches this game live, all our games on Facebook Live. So now you can start selling impressions about how people can watch on Facebook Live. So it's just about a different way of thinking of how you build out your sponsorship. And they need to move, once again, it's not logo. It's what can you do? What is your database? What can you tell me about your fan base? So that I understand that you have this detailed breakdown, their buying power, who they are, the age, demographic, and all those kind of things. Those things really come into being when you're trying to sell sponsorships.
Okay, great. We conclude now. Joe, some parting words on your side in terms of that critical advice that you can give to an emerging event?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're pretty new to the sports world. We've been doing media monitoring for about 12 years. We only really entered the sports world about 2 years ago. So I know historically some of these sports services provided were quite expensive, especially for the smaller teams. We're trying to change that. So, if I can just say that, I don't want to say we're cheap, but we are cheaper. So we're really trying to, for us, it's not just about the money. We actually want to try and see what we can do to help the industry and these smaller teams, because I feel like, it was interesting going back to Boland Rugby that one of their games was actually they had more viewers at the event than one of the provincial rugby games. So small sports is really, community sports is really changing. It's a changing landscape. So, so if anybody's interested, they should get in touch.
Okay, great. Thanks for coming along, Joe, and doing the presentation. And we'll talk more about how smaller emerging events and clubs could make use of the services pertaining to sponsorship analysis. Thanks for coming along, Dirk. Appreciating your input as well. And because of time, I'm going to switch over to Nsika. And welcome again. You here. I've just removed Nsika from the. I removed the wrong people. I'm flying solo. I'm pressing all the buttons. Thank you, Joe and Doug, for coming along. Okay, Nsika, once again. So I invited you based on a LinkedIn post that you've done, and it resonated with me. In terms of what is it that the smaller emerging rights holder, club, or community-based sports festival is not doing in terms of engaging sponsorship on a proper basis. Welcome. And first tell us what is it that you do, and then you can go straight ahead and tell us why sponsors are losing out by not partnering community sports festivals and smaller clubs, which have become quite a social phenomenon over the last few years. You've mentioned the Philly Games as an example. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi Gert, and to everyone online. So what we do is we really try to facilitate partnerships between brands and obviously sports teams or sports organizations across the board, from small clubs, township clubs, semi-professional to all the way through to professional teams playing in the SA20. So that's essentially what we do, is try to broker those deals. I think to answer your question, it's not a what are sponsors missing out on, more than, are the clubs doing a good enough job of positioning themselves as an alternative or a good offering for brands to come on board on, right? You find that many of the clubs can't articulate what it is that a brand or a sponsor would be coming on board and getting. And it boils down to the fact a lot of them talk about logo placement, the old typical kind of way sponsorships and sponsors were viewed as, we're going to put your logo in front of a shirt, and we're going to put perimeter boards, and you're going to get XYZ in activation space, and we get 20,000 people at a game. And where the world has shifted to, and I said this earlier, with budgets getting smaller, what sponsors are looking for are outcomes. So when guys make these presentations, and they put presentations together, they've got to put them together with the thing in mind that if I'm speaking to XYZ Corporation, their biggest pain points are 1, 2, 3. I'm going to help solve a business problem by them coming on board as a sponsor. You got to create these niche targeted things, proposals that speak to and answer some of the business problems that certain organization has. And that's what's missing right now. People are putting together sponsorship proposals, clubs, and this is across all levels, right? And it's not just the community-based clubs. I've seen some presentations from some of the bigger professional clubs where they're very generic and they don't answer to specific questions or specific business-related issues that they can answer. It's a generic proposal. So that's where we've got to get this right. And that's where the big gap is right now, is that some of these proposals are not database, so they can't tell you, yes, you get 20,000 people there, but who are those 20,000 people? What are their demographic? What are their spending power? When it comes to the brand that you're speaking to, how do they interact with that brand? How do they help solve that brand problem or that, that business problem for the brand? And that's where the gap lies right now, is that proposals are built on impressions, not outcomes. And even then, they are not curated to answer to specific business problems faced by brands.
So if you look at the massive following for football in this country, for every 100 sponsors that goes to rugby, one would go to football. There's this big disconnect, a chasm, a big divide that one could call it. Where's the learning to be done, on the rights holder side or on the sponsor side, or both?
I think it's a bit of both. And I think all sponsors, all brands or potential sponsors, understand that football is the biggest market, right, in South Africa. That is without a doubt. I think where we find the big disconnect is the credibility of data, right? And that is a big thing. And I'll take right now, in fact, I won't even go to the Springboks. I'll take some of the unions. You can go and get a season ticket to go watch the Lions at Ellis Park, whether it's a suite or in the stands. You have to fill out your data and they ask you various questions. So immediately, the Lions can tell you that on our database, we have 20,000 people between the ages of 18 and 35. They like 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is their spending power because they bought a season ticket. So you can kind of range where their spending power is, right? So that's credible data that you can now use to tell a sponsor. Actually, between the ages of 18 and 35, we have 20,000 people. Their spending capacity, or they can spend between 900 and 2,000 Rand, because we know this because they've bought a season ticket. That's missing in football. You can't buy a season ticket. So you can't collect that data. And even the data that is collected is not as accurate. You can't, and in fact, one of the football clubs claimed to have the biggest supporter base in the country. But if you were to ask, can you give us, a breakdown of that data? We want our core target as a brand is between ages of 18 and 35, and you break it down by region. They won't be able to do it, but they do have the biggest, but they just don't have the data that you can now buy into. And what we need to understand is that outside of team association, one of the biggest things that people are looking for, brands are looking for, sponsors are looking for, they need to sell, at the end of the day, their product. They need to speak to the right audience. And if you don't have that data, as strong as your case may be, you're not going to get it over the line with them.
Yeah, somebody was commenting the other day, and it was a learning curve for me as well, when he said the club Kaizer Chiefs Orlando Pirates is a property. There's a brand value attached to it. And then the derby between the two is a different property with a different brand value. Now, how many of us understand that difference, that the entity, the event are two different properties with two different brand values? Your take on that?
Yes. Yeah, I can hear it. I guess all brands, right? All the football clubs are essentially a brand. But the Soweto Derby is undoubtedly one of the biggest games that you can watch. And so just by virtue of that, it does become and I'll say this, a brand of its own. It's the certain thing. And we were having a conversation, I think it was around the third economy of sport, around, what can you build around an event? That's exactly what the Soweto Derby creates. It creates a third economy where brands that aren't official sponsors of the Soweto Derby, or brands that aren't associated with the teams or the PSL, can now start creating watch parties, and that creates a third economy. And that's what happens when you have something as big as a Soweto Derby. It becomes a brand of its own, and it creates an economy of its own outside of the guys that are involved in. So that's very true. It does have, and I'll say this in inverted commas, a life of its own, because it now creates a whole new different stream or potential for people to get involved with, for sponsors to actually start looking at getting involved with.
So what are when you engage rights holders, be it now clubs or sports festivals or events for that matter, what is the one thing that you pick up, if I may put it bluntly, of which they don't have a clue of in terms of how to present and position yourself to brands? What is the one thing that you pick up?
It's not one specific thing, right? I think, and I say this with caution, I really do, but outside of the so-called big three teams in the country, I honestly do not believe that many of the other teams have commercial teams. And what having a commercial department and having a commercial team kind of does for you is you now start finding the gaps in the market where you can start selling to brands to come on board and kind of sponsor, and that's the problem right there. There is no one who's looking after the commercial side of many of these other clubs, and so a lot of opportunity and I say money in inverted commas is left at the table for them, and that's the problem. And it goes back to not having this. It means that teams are engaging with brands very late in the process. So they'll wait till the end of the season to start engaging with brands for sponsors. Whereas, they don't realize that actually brand X's financial year or their planning starts here. So by this time they finished, we should have secured the deal. Because they don't have a team dedicated to that, they kind of miss those opportunities. You go to a brand and they're halfway through their planning, they've planned, they've secured budget for things, and now you can't fit in because you are never engaging them early enough. And I mean, like a 6 to 9 month window is what you should look at. But if you looking after marketing, you're looking after comms, you're on the ground on the day, and you don't have the time to understand which brands are doing what because you're busy with the day-to-day stuff that you have to do. You don't have the luxury of saying, okay, guys, I need to engage brand X because they're preparing their marketing budget, they're preparing now, so we've got 6 months, and then we should be able to find out. And that's a big problem, is that they don't give themselves enough time, and that is purely because there is no one there that is looking purely at the commercial side, and how do you really, really get to milk and get the most out of commercializing your team.
I can attest to that. I had a conversation with the sponsor of a PSL team. They made a multi-million rand investment 2 years ago, and the person in charge of the sponsorship at the company said it is the biggest mistake they've ever made, simply because nothing happened after the check was handed over. And but the Stoic philosophers, they would say that the opportunity lies in the problem. In conclusion, what is that opportunity?
Yeah, so just to go back to that statement you've made, Gerrit, I think it's easy for a brand to come out and blame and say they've done nothing because of the team, right? I honestly believe if you're going into a partnership as a brand, you understand what you wanted to do for your business, right? So if I, as Ntsigamsutu Incorporated, am sponsoring a PSL team, I understand why I'm doing it and what I want to get out of that sponsorship. So regardless of the team wanting to do things, I should be able to say, yes, I'll sponsor you. Here's my plan, and this is how I want to activate the sponsorship. Because sponsoring a team, and the second thing is here, I said, sponsoring a team and having a budget to leverage the sponsorship are two different things. Yes, you can have the budget to pay the rights owner for the rights to sponsor, but ultimately you need to have the budget to leverage that sponsorship as well. So when going into this, are you going into it putting your brand logo on there without having money to leverage it? Because then that's a problem all on its own. You need to have a budget that is a leverage budget. And, people have spoken about I think that said like a 3-to-1, 3 times what you use to sponsor the team should be your leverage budget. So if you're sponsoring 5 million, you should have 15 million leverage budget to make sure that you get the most out of it. And those are the kind of things that, people should speak to. But then with the change and looking at it differently is, how do you want your brand to show up in the spaces where your thing is? Where your brand is. If I own Gerald FC and I sponsor Gerald FC, how is the Ntsigamsutu brand going to show up there? Like, how do I want to show up? How am I activating? And that becomes very key as well.
I think, that's a disconnect that we've talked about right in the beginning. But thanks for now, Nsika. I'm going to bring Joe and Doug back into the equation. There's Doug. I took out Nsika again. I don't know what. I've got a beef with him. There's a question from our good friend Mandla. Doug, you want to shoot? You want to go for it?
Boxing does have a proud history and heritage in South Africa. So I believe there's some renewed energy of getting it back to number 2 sport in SA, maybe number 1. I think what's important, or where I believe that the opportunity lies, is to think of themselves as a gateway to people. And if they think that way, then they need to figure out how to become the most robust platform that they can to enable that access to happen. Start small, invest in your product. So develop a boxing championship that potentially moves around the country in a format that people understand, that people want to watch and engage with, and deliver it. Focus on the finer details. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it needs to be watchable and it needs to be consistent. Once you've started to rebuild that trust, you've started to generate that organic engagement and that reach, and that passion for the sport is once again reignited, then things will begin to flow. I'm not a big believer in top down, and I think Live Golf perhaps is a controversial topic to speak about given its potential revenue pressure. They've come in, massive disruption, thrown a huge amount of money at it, but because the base isn't there, we're seeing potential instability. So I'm a big proponent for, if you're trying to rebuild something, start slow, build something of value, and once that platform is set, you can scale from there. And that's when, I mean, if you're trying to rebuild something too, brands are going to need to regain that trust. If they're going to start to be investing their money back into sports or back into events or opportunities, they need to know that their brand is secure in those partnerships too. So that would be my advice.
Okay, thanks for that, Doug. Joe?
I would agree with Doug. I think you must maybe go and look at what the lay of the land is right now. Maybe set some targets for yourself. Maybe look at what has made other sports popular. So like, what has EFC's done to become so popular? Maybe try and adopt some of their ideas. I know, obviously we have Dricus du Plessis, which is a world champion, and that's really moved the needle. But, I would agree with Doug. Start small, get a game plan, set some targets for yourself, and then just measure it and see what's working, what's not working.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Nsika, concluding words?
Yeah, just to answer, I guess I'll also take a stab at answering Mandla's question. And I've had countless conversations with Mandla around a few things. But the idea is to really build a base, right? And a base where it continually shows up in the same manner, looking exactly the same. What sponsors don't want is an event in Joburg looking different to one in Limpopo, looking different to one in the Eastern Cape. So you build a base and a look and feel for it, and you go with one thing. And I think that kind of mentioned, you build one, right? Whether it's, don't know if it's a junior boxing tournament or if it's a national box, that just literally, it's like a traveling circus where we pick this up and we can go put it in Cape Town and it's going to look exactly the same. The experience people get is the same. The experience they get, and then you pick that up and you move. And once you get that right, you can start moving it and start scaling from there. I think the most important thing is to build one thing, and you start maybe with one sponsor. One guy comes on board and they do it for you. You build that so much that you start scaling it up. And one of the biggest problems we have is, people are going to say, but we don't have TV. But you create something. You create things outside of people looking for TV. You create little pockets. I mean, and boxing is very prime. I think, Joe, you mentioned EFC, it's become such a hype that like kids who, I don't know why they love like fighting, but they're so interested in EFC and UFC and all these kind of things, because there's kind of a culture and a hype and a lifestyle built around this UFC and EFC fighting. So that's what boxing's got to do. You got to build some sort of cultural center around where boxing is and what boxing is in South Africa. And from there, it will just start growing. I was saying to someone who was asking me around, how a certain brand is selling more shoes than another one. And I was saying to them, guys, there are more people that listen to music and engage in cultural kind of activities than there are people who run and play sport. The minute you can create and create a place where your brand sits at the intersection of culture and sport, you're good to go. because the people that don't have to fight are there for the cultural expenditures. The fighters are there because they have to fight. And then brands have got a niche where they've got both culture and the sport just tapped into one place. And that's where we're going to try and find ourselves, or that's where boxing kind of needs to build a niche for themselves in South Africa.
Okay, thank you very much for that concluding words, Nchika. Thanks for coming along, Doug and Joe. And hopefully we can repeat this conversation in a few months or so. That's where we would leave it for now. Thanks for coming along. Until next time.
Thanks, Harriet. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. Have a good
Bye-bye.
day.
I'll end the stream there. Thank you, guys.